We're going to be talking about a lot of controversy today, from President Joe Biden to Fani Willis to Donald J. Trump. Make sure you guys watch this entire video as I have new evidence of Hunter Biden's connection to China and why Joe had no choice but to pardon his own son. Even with all that, mainstream liberal media continues to deny any wrongdoing from the big guy.
America is one of the most corrupt countries. Look at this guy, President Biden, biggest criminal I've ever seen. He's terrible, man. And the reason I know that is because I'm a capitalist. Biden is a communist. So in 2020, Biden gets elected. He beats my friend Donald Trump, very good friend of mine. We're capitalists. But the communists and the socialists and the crooks hate him. I'm an oil guy. I own oil wells like Mr. Tata. See, the rich own commodities. There was a pipeline running from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. Biden cut that off. What does that mean? I was selling oil in those days for $30 a barrel, went to $130 a barrel. That's dollars. I knew exactly what Biden was doing. He was going to destroy the middle class. So there'd be two classes of people, rich and everybody else poor.
A lot of critics of President Biden share Robert Kiyosaki's point of view here. Many of them feel as if the president is absolutely corrupt. However, some liberals are just not convinced. And when they're presented with evidence, they completely just change the conversation. And guys, I just want to thank you all so much for hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Also, thank you for sharing these videos to help us get the word out about the truth and what's really going on in Congress and our government. All right, guys, let's jump in.
Speculative?
After 4 years of Donald Trump.
Did money not change hands?
Scott,
Did it not?
4 years of Donald Trump, 4 years of a Joe Biden DOJ looking into these very things. I'm still waiting to see.
Well, he can't be charged. He's the president.
Right? I'm
Joe
still
Biden
waiting.
can't be charged.
I'm not talking about charges. I'm still waiting to see the proof of Joe Biden enriching himself. I take his brother and his son, perhaps.
I'll give you the direct line.
Otherwise,
I'll give you the
your
direct
colleague,
line.
James Comer, could have produced the evidence, and he didn't.
He did. A Chinese company transferred money to a shell company owned by Hunter and Jim Biden that then transferred money directly to Jim and Sarah Biden's shell company that then transferred the money to Jim and Sarah's personal account, who then immediately wrote a check for $40,000 to Joe Biden. So to say that there was no evidence, to say there was no evidence is not true. It's not true.
What I'm saying is that Trump was president for 4 years. He wanted to charge Joe Biden. Why did the charges not come? And I think that still remains an open question. If there is something illegal happening here, there should be charges on the basis of what you're saying, and there have not been.
Well, he just pardoned Hunter
that is
for an 11-year time period. An 11-year time
He
period.
just wiped the slate.
Hang on, guys.
Jim will be next, by the way.
We're waiting for the charges, and when the charges come, we'll have a conversation about that. I promise you that.
Now, I'm not really sure if Abby's going to be happy to know that new evidence has popped up regarding the president's alleged crime spree. Just recently, the National Archives and Records Administration released photos of then President Joe Biden meeting with China's Xi Jinping. Together with them was Hunter Biden and multiple Chinese executives from BHR Partners, a Chinese state-backed company aligned with Xi's Global Belt and Road Initiative. Now, let's just think about this for a second. Isn't it just strange that these photos didn't come out during the 2020 presidential election? That's because they're releasing them solely due to the litigation of the America First Legal Foundation. They filed to have this information released back in September 2022. It's now abundantly clear why President Biden pardoned Hunter Biden. And there's a chance that he pardons his brother Jim and then maybe even himself. All while he's still in power. He better hurry up because he only got a couple weeks. He doesn't care about his legacy at this point since it's already been tarnished. So I guess it's okay for him to go out taking as many losses so long as he keeps himself and his family safe from legal repercussions and maybe even jail time. Now, speaking of losses though, you guys, remember Fani Willis, right? You know, Fanny Pack Fanny, Fanny Faux Fanny. Yeah, that Fanny. So besides getting booted off the Georgia election interference case, a judge had made life even harder for the district attorney. With her lies being exposed to the public, there's just not much room left to run, right? Do you guys remember when she denied speaking to the White House about going after Trump? You remember there was these rumors, the White House and the Biden administration made Fani Willis go after Trump during the Georgia election interference case? Something like that, right? Well, something that the White House echoed, arguing that Fani Willis has never met with them to discuss any of these things. Watch.
The White House fired back after defense attorney Ashley Merchant testified yesterday about a meeting between District Attorney Fani Willis and Vice President Kamala Harris. Merchant cited evidence that Willis visited the White House in February of 2023. That's just months before a grand jury in Georgia indicted President Trump in the state's election interference case. Fani Willis is, of course, prosecuting that case and facing disqualification for misconduct because she was having an affair with the man that she hired as the highest paid prosecutor on the case, and it just gets more tawdry from there. We've all watched the drama play out. The White House claims the vice president was hosting an event attended by hundreds of black leaders and that she did not directly speak with Willis.
Now, this was earlier this year, guys. Fani Willis also denied having any documentation with regard to a possible meeting with the VP. And being a prosecutor, she would know that it's foolish to lie about these sort of things. Isn't there like a punishment for that, like perjury or something like that? Although it does seem that Fani Willis talked to some officials within the J6 committee. In fact, she's holding back this evidence, even though she's been disqualified from the Georgia election interference case.
Well, it's been an ongoing battle for Fulton County DA Fani Willis. First, the Court of Appeals ruled that she's disqualified from leading the election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump and his co-defendants. And now a Fulton County judge has ruled that Willis can be subpoenaed by the Georgia Senate. The ruling was issued today by Fulton County Superior Court Judge Shakira Ingram after lawyers for the Senate sought to compel Willis to comply with the Senate's request earlier this year to come testify before them as they look into whether or not Willis is guilty of misconduct. That misconduct allegations stem from her personal relationship with former special prosecutor Nathan Wade. A lawyer for Willis tells the Associated Press that she plans to appeal this decision with the Georgia Supreme Court, in part because some of the documentation she's been asked to turn over to the Senate is confidential and could possibly compromise the election interference case.
So she's using this sort of let's just call it a loophole to deny Republicans to further investigate possible misconduct on her end. I gotta admit, it's kind of a smart move if it really works, but not just with her hiring of her own lover, Nathan Wade, but her possible correspondence with the Biden-Harris administration as well. So Fani Willis now only has until, let's just say, the middle of January to file a list of claimed privileges and objections to any subpoena requests from the special committee. It's now only a matter of time until we're provided with possible communication between the Georgia DA and other high-profile officials within the White House. Communications that could very well show colluding against President-elect Trump. That is, if these events actually happen. Now, on that note, guys, President-elect Trump got voted in for his America First point of view. And even though he's not in office yet, he's already making waves against China, with Trump alleging that there are these Chinese soldiers stationed at Panama Canal.
But he does think, and I do as well, a lot of Americans, that there's a problem when the Chinese are operating so much of the Panama Canal. So how does he get the Chinese off of the Panama Canal?
Well, I think what he's doing is he's signaling America is back with Trump now in the White House. Enough of us getting beat up, ignored, taking a back seat to the rest of the world. His family is not getting paid off by the Chinese government. So it's not as if he's got to worry about that. What he's saying is China is probably one of our number one national security threats, and it's definitely one of our number one opponents when you think about our economic growth and our economic influence around the world. So I think what he's talking about is taking it head on, recognizing it, calling it out, and actually having a plan to deal with it. He's not talking about military invasions. What he's talking about is using the power of our economy, the power of American influence, to be able to compete with China.
But of course, mainstream liberal media won't see it this way. In their minds, Trump is calling for conflict, which kind of goes to show like how much they cling to his every single word, just hanging off of his sack. Thankfully, CNN has Scott Jennings to explain what the president-elect is actually doing. Watch.
Well, I tell you what is very serious, and that is pushing back on the encroachment of Chinese influence in the Western Hemisphere. Yes, I do.
This does that?
I think Donald Trump is trying to send a message to the Chinese, and he's also trying to send a message to everyone else in the hemisphere that I'm not going to put up with this encroachment. Now, what is true is that China is having encroachment in this hemisphere, in Africa, all over the world. They are trying to act like the world's leading superpower. They are trying to exert their values and their way of life all over the world. That used to be our job. And I think what Donald Trump is saying here is, I don't want this in my backyard. America is the world's superpower. More America is better. And I'm sending a message that I'm not going to put up with this sort of creeping Chinese influence in my own backyard.
Help me with this thinking though, really quick. And Karen, I'll bring you in a second. But if it angers Panama, if it hurts relations with Panama, the calculation is it won't and it doesn't matter?
Do I care if Panama is angry? What is Van Halen going to come and be upset about it? I mean, honestly, I need them to understand, and Donald Trump needs them to understand that we are the dominant superpower in this hemisphere, and he needs to have a conversation with them about that. And I hope that he does. And yes, they are an ally, but this is a vital thing, this Panama Canal. But I'm just telling you, the encroachment of Chinese influence around the world must be stopped. And if Donald Trump's getting serious about that, that's a good thing.
When will these liberal hosts understand that this is what America voted for? We want to be on top again. And the sooner that these other nations understand it, the better. If they're an ally, then they would understand why Trump is saying all these things. But I guess they're not used to a leader who's willing to stand up for the country. They're so focused on their hate for Trump that they completely fail to see what he's doing here. Now, do any of you guys agree with the president-elect's strategy here? Since we talked about weak leaders, President Joe Biden has finally broken his silence regarding the multiple drones flying over our night skies. Now, guys, I covered the drone situation in a previous live stream where I talk about where these objects may be coming from.
Well, 37 federal inmates who were sentenced to die for their crimes will now instead spend the rest of their life in prison. President Biden moved today to commute their sentences, an act he said was guided by his conscience. One of those inmates, Philadelphia drug kingpin Kamala Savage, convicted of the killing of 12 people, including 4 children. Those youngest victims died when Savage ordered the firebombing of the house where they lived in an act of retribution against a witness.
We were told from our prosecution team on Sunday afternoon. I was actually gathered with my in-laws for our family Christmas. My sister was gathered with her in-laws, and we got the call, and I was angry. I'm completely hurt, frustrated, and angry. So in May, we heard that this was a possibility. And at that point, we began writing letters to the pardon attorney. I reached out requesting an in-person meeting in D.C., and we were refused.
I can't even believe that this has actually happened, a commuting of sentences like this of 37 victims, all but 3, which was certainly a political scheme.
You know, we trusted the judicial system. We sat through court. I watched my mother be murdered. I've watched images of her body laying on the ground. He does not have compassion for who? A criminal?
Is he trying to distract us from the fact that he pardoned his own son? President Joe Biden is receiving a ton of backlash for his recent actions, namely for commuting the sentence of 37 inmates who were on death row. Before this, there were 40 federal death row inmates. He's now being criticized by President-elect Donald Trump as well as officials from both Republican and Democratic parties. He's also got some harsh feedback from anti-death penalty activists who said that he should have done this for all 40 inmates. Trump, though, was not amused, and he went on Truth Social to call out President Biden. In his post, he says, "Merry Christmas to the radical left lunatics who are constantly trying to obstruct our court system and our elections and are always going after the great citizens and patriots of the United States, but in particular, their political opponent, me. They know that their only chance of survival is getting pardons from a man who has absolutely no idea what he's doing." He then went on to send a message to these same individuals. He says that he refuses to wish these lucky souls a Merry Christmas. Instead, he tells them to, quote, "go to hell," adding that in just days, America will be great again. He also greeted the wonderful soldiers of China who were illegally operating at the Panama Canal. But we'll get to that later. Now, Biden's move is suddenly being seen as a political move. Trump believes in the death penalty, and if President Joe Biden was so against it, then why would he leave 3 of these individuals on death row? If you really didn't believe in it, you'd remove all of them, wouldn't you? Just kind of an odd thing to do. Although the president is also getting praised by some of his colleagues. One of them is squad member Representative Ayanna Pressley. Here's what she had to say about it.
And so I've commended the president for having the authority and using it. In the 39 pardons and the 1,500 commutations for those on home confinement. And today, this decision to commute the sentences of those on death row to life sentences without parole. State-sanctioned murder is not justice. It is not a deterrent for crime. It does not support healing. It is not compassionate of our peer nations. We are an anomaly when it comes to the inhumane and barbaric practice of the death penalty. And moreover, in Trump's first administration, he executed more people in the final days of his presidency than have been executed in the last 6 decades. So we have every reason to believe that that's what he would do for those that, in an expedited way, those currently on death row. State-sanctioned murder is not justice. And today, what President Biden did demonstrated moral leadership, compassionate leadership, informed by his own faith, and a position that he's held for a very long time.
This is what she means in a nutshell. President Joe Biden can empathize with the murderers. President-elect Trump, on the other hand, he can empathize with the victims of said murderers. They're on completely different pages when it comes to this issue, which again drills in the idea that President Biden has citizens of this country at the bottom of his priority list. Do you agree with that idea? So what do you guys think? Now, on that note, guys, I just want to redirect you to a previous live stream that I did that exposes exactly how Vice President Kamala Harris is behind closed doors. Here's a clue, though. She's not very humble. I also talked about the Democrats that are now siding with Donald Trump just weeks before he's sworn back into office. Make sure you guys check that one out right after this one. As always, appreciate you guys being here. Thanks so much for hitting the like button and subscribing. We'll see you guys next time.